In this video, we will talk about possible Serpentine Tower connections with the mysterious Banshees of Tibia, since there is a possibility that they are part of a previous mission or even part of the quest. For many years, players have been intrigued to learn why in remote places, like Jakundaf Desert or deep within White Flower Temple, we find lonely banshees. Even the one found in Jakundaf Desert is next to a teleport and a lever. Is this place related to a quest? As we mentioned in the previous chapter, there seems to be a connection between one of the princesses described in Ankreman with the Queen of the Banshee, and that there is a possibility that these princesses are used for demonic rituals. Therefore, probably the teleport next to the Banshee is part of a mission not yet discovered. For this, we will first start with a book found in the Palace of Ankreman, which tells us about a princess named Tarmehi, who was the daughter of a pharaoh named Uthemuth. One day they went on a diplomatic mission to Tais, where she fell in love with a nobleman from Tais and she became pregnant. But since it was a forbidden love, when Pharaoh found out about the situation, he ordered that she and her daughter be executed in the arena of Ankreman. When the behemoths were about to kill her, the young nobleman from Tais rescued her and they fled to the north. Then the pharaoh went to look for her in Tais and asked the king to give him her daughter, but the king claimed not to know about her whereabouts. Here we must understand the key words of this book. In this case, the phrase "nobleman of Tais" is fundamental. In addition to that, the book suggests that she escaped to Tais, since the pharaoh chased her to that city. But who will this nobleman from Tais be? At this point, it's important to have paid attention to old quests, as the lore of a quest can have very significant consequences for other missions. In this case, there is a quest called Noble Armor Quest, located in the vicinity of Tais. In short, the story of this quest is about a mage named Dago, who tried to summon a black demon on the Mount Sternum volcano. His experiment was unsuccessful and he ended up dying in the attempt. In this case, the important thing is two facts. First, that he also tried to perform a demonic ritual, and the other is the fact that we get a noble armor and a crown helmet in the quest. Is this the nobleman spoken of in the book? All the evidence would point to whether it was him, since we also found a lyre under fire, which would indicate that this man was a bard. And if you saw my video about the lore of the Nightmare Knights and the Necromancer's Brotherhood of Bones, you will understand that in one of the bases of the Nightmare Knights known as Dream Challenge Quest, there were necromancers infiltrated, in order to learn the secrets of the dream walking. On this fortress we will find a book that seems unimportant, but as we have repeated, sometimes the simplest book can have a great clue. In this case, there is a book called How to Seduce Women in 7 Steps, which tells how to seduce a woman, and a good option is to pretend to be a bard. But why would they want to seduce a princess of Ankreman? The answer is more complex and is part of the lore of Tibia, which also intersects with many mysteries. But in summary, the blood of the princesses of Ankreman is more powerful than the normal blood of humans, since it has elven blood, which indicates that when it was mixed with the blood of direct descendants of Baina, this blood acquired great powers beyond normal, which grants powers much greater than the normal ones of a human. It is for this reason that Arkhotep, Goshnar and Farumbras are so powerful, as they also possess this bloodline from the royal family of Ankreman. But going back to the Banshees, in conclusion, the motive for kidnapping these princesses would be to use it for demonic rituals. Then, Dago, although he was a nobleman of Tais, corruption and intrigue by necromancy led him to join this sect, and one of his missions was to kidnap one of these women in order to create a demonic ritual. As for the Banshee of Tais, she is most likely the Princess Tarmehi, mentioned in the book in Ankreman. Since if we go to read a document next to Chestakars in Tais, we can read in the document the chronicle of the Tais army investigating the place where we found the Banshee under White Flower Temple. The document tells us about a group of people were part of a cult and some demonic rituals were performed there. But then what should we do with this information? Most likely, there is an old hidden quest, but it was never discovered. And perhaps, there is a possibility that this quest is part of the Serpentine Tower, or perhaps just a separate quest, but it could provide valuable information on what to do in Ankreman. But what would be the clues to do here? If we head to the Jakundaf Desert, apart from the enclosed Banshee, we will also find a book in a very particular place. This book has a curious text, which is a literal quote to a movie called Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The book seems to be a joke or a tribute to the inspiration to create all the lore of Planes of Havoc, Demon Bunny and Paradox Tower. However, it is rare to find a book in Tibia that does not have useful information for the game. In this case, the book mentions that we must first find a holy pin, and then count to 3, and the book repeatedly named the number 3. So there is a clear clue to something related to the number 3 and something about a holy pin. But what does this mean? If any of you have done the desert quest and got all the keys, you will surely know that in one of the chests we will find a panpipe. And now that I've mentioned the story of bards and banshees, this instrument probably makes sense to you now. Most likely, the bard who used this banshee has forgotten his instrument there in the depths of the desert, and that would explain the relation between these two topics. So, if we look again at the hints that Sipsoft has given us, they make more and more sense to us, like the image shown in the video now, where Amuro the quester plays a lament for the banshee with his panpipe, telling us that Othma was the lover of this poor lonely banshee. Do you remember Othma? The one named in the book about Lake Amrose, where we can supposedly find the legendary golden helmet. Also, we know that the NPC outside of Jakundaf is a necromancer named Adrenius. He is a follower of Fafnir, and most likely he was the one who wrote the book that mentions Othma and Lake Amrose. On the other hand, we know that Fafnir is a goddess who is also praised in the city of Karlin, the same place where Ferumbra's mother escaped after the war in Planes of Havoc. Also, remember the research paper that talks about the Reds in the Serpentine Tower? Which tells us that they were creatures similar to demons but weaker. Well, perhaps now it will be possible to understand the meaning of the diversity of fire devils in the vicinity of this place or in Ghostland, since we know that in order to perform a demon summoning, a large amount of energy is needed, which would explain the trapped dragons, that would be the source of energy. The same happens in other places, like in the ritual room in Drethia and the respawn of the worms to one side. Tibia has an impressive history, and with enough patience, little by little we can begin to connect all the parts of this big puzzle. In fact, Serpentine Tower is the place which explain all the old mysteries at once. Now back to the banshees. As mentioned, the clues we would use would be the number 3 and the holy pin, which we will assume is about the panpipes. Now when we go to White Flower Temple, the book Holy Granade makes sense. In the place of this mysterious abandoned banshee, we repeatedly find the number 3 as well, but now we find it on objects. We can see 3 basins and 3 mirrors. Even in one of the basins there is a bone, while the other 2 basins are empty. So what is our mission here? What should we do? This type of question is what we must always ask ourselves to try to solve a mystery. What would our mission be within this environment? In this case, our mission is most likely to cure the banshee from her curse. For this we would need a ritual to carry out to cure the undead state of this princess. The ritual part is probably the most complex, but we have some clues. In this banshee's room we can find, in addition to the bone, a skull on the bed and a dirty cape in the wardrobe. Most likely we should sacrifice what was left of her in the basins, and exert some action with the panpipe. I could almost confirm that this belongs to a quest, as this banshee's respawn time is totally different from any other banshee. If you kill this banshee, she will respawn almost 20 minutes later, which is not normal. In fact, it has a strong similarity to the Jinn's respawn time in Serpentine Tower, therefore they likely have a connection. What could be achieved here? Most likely, somehow, we could access to the banshee in Jakundaf, where we can use the lever and use the teleport. It is very likely that this teleport will take us to an 8th quarter of Banshee quest, which is inaccessible so far. Since in that quest, we only access 7 rooms, and we never access the last one in the middle. Also, have you noticed that the monuments in that room are written in a strange language? If you read the monuments inside this place, you will notice a strange language, which is known as ancient language, or demonic language, since it is the same language used by the demons. But what does this mean to us? Well, if you go to the Serpentine Tower Library, there will be a very curious book that has yet to be deciphered. If you read carefully, this book is the same language used in Ghostland. In addition, in the Isle of the King's Library, you will also find some books that talk about Ghostland and the events that happened there when some explorers went to investigate the place. One of the books tells us that they had to fight hordes of specters and undead, until from one moment to another, they saw a mummy. And as the book described, the mummy slowly raised his finger pointing at them and said, "Shabala."